Hello, welcome everybody. This is Hemp for Victory. My name is Robert Head, Chair for Hemp for Victory. Today I'm joined by retired Lieutenant Colonel Todd Scattini and Mike Bajuz, who is a West Point graduate and a graduate from Yale School of Business. Today we're going to talk about post-reconstruction of war on Ukraine. Now, a lot of times during war, the farmlands are absolutely destroyed. And there's a lot of things that go into reconstruction of a country after the combat. One of those things is agricultural properties. And within the agricultural property, we believe that hemp is a viable effort and crop for Ukraine that could help not only establish and clean their agricultural soil and produce better harvest going forward, but also could in turn help introduce them into textiles and other types of industries that could produce a strong economy for them. So, my dear friend Todd Scattini, I appreciate you being here, man.
Yeah,
Tell us a little bit about, you're going to EarthX, and you're going to be talking about this mouthful called post-war reconstruction with hemp in Ukraine.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm in Dallas, Texas now with you to speak at EarthX, where I'm actually chairing a panel of 5 hemp experts on all different aspects of the hemp plant. And basically we're talking about hemp, cannabis, and controlled environment agriculture in terms of post-conflict reconstruction and development, and what this means going forward. Right? It's basically making recognition that we're in the midst of an inflection point in human history where we're battling the climate change, weather patterns are changing, migration patterns are changing, it's kind of chaos. Then you have a conflict, a hot war going on in Ukraine, right next to NATO's borders, that is, threatening to destabilize all of Europe and much of the world, and already has. And so, it's really chaos in this moment, but I think it's in chaos you can simply find opportunity, right? I think Sun Tzu said this, right? Mm-hmm. And so the idea is to begin considering how we could reconstruct Ukraine after combat, after the war. It's kind of the concept that I'm trying to drive forward is a combination of the Marshall Plan, but with weed. Right. So it's kind of it's the Marshall Plan, including the Hemp for Victory plan. These are both 2 American plans that took place, one in World War II with USDA's program called Hemp for Victory, where we had to reteach farmers how to grow hemp and process hemp again, and the Marshall Plan, which was George C. Marshall, then Secretary of State, in 1947. He puts forth this plan to rebuild the agricultural infrastructure of Europe. Essentially, we gave, I think it was $13.5 billion, which equated to 10% of the American GDP at the time, to 16 different countries, right? To include former Nazi Germany, to include former fascist Italy, and all of these countries that had been destroyed. Well, and it was hotly contested for sure, because we were also in a post-war phase as well.
Right.
Even though it was booming in the 40s, and America was firmly set into a position of the superpower. And after that, we started reconstructing Europe's agricultural infrastructure. This idea is somewhat the same, but a little bit different. Instead of focusing on 16 different countries, we're focusing on one country, Ukraine. An agricultural country whose agricultural capacities are really being destroyed right now. The agricultural infrastructure for processing of their wheat and other agricultural products is being destroyed. And much of the soil, which is famously known to be very fertile and very rich, is being poisoned with depleted uranium rounds and explosives and fuel and blood and going feral in some instances, because it's just not being farmed. So the idea is, when peace somehow reigns over Ukraine, and it will one day, is to really begin focusing on the agricultural infrastructure that's able to extract all of the benefits of this plant, right? Everything. With this one plant, we can give them food, fuel, fiber, construction material, medicine, right? When you think about medicine, right, the Ukrainians are a nation who are at war and who are displaced outside of their borders. They will suffer post-traumatic stress at for generations really, and at a societal level. They'll be dealing with many of the same things that we as veterans deal with, complex injuries from combat, difficulty sleeping, depression, anger, fear. All of these things are going on. So, and we know very well within our organization the benefit that cannabis can have as a medicine, but it's tough. This is a tough one, right? Because people question whether or not it's medicine. This is a product that has been denigrated for 87 years, even though up until 1937, when we prohibited cannabis in the United States, it was the second most prescribed medicine in the American pharmacopoeia. 87 years of misinformation and disinformation and yellow journalism have destroyed the reputation of the plant. And we're just now starting to see all of the bounty that it can give as a medicine. We're super supportive of that. But I think in terms of reconstruction and the development of a hemp industry in Ukraine, hempcrete presents this opportunity unlike we've ever seen. And I think it's part of our mission really is to educate and inspire leadership to understand what that opportunity is, and that means digging into what hempcrete can do. Right. This one product.
So, Mike, you are that's your neck of the woods, the Ukraine area, right? Where you grew up. Where did you grow up in specifically?
So, when you look at the map of Ukraine, you see them on the western in the western part of Ukraine. It's a few countries border Ukraine, right? Slovakia, Poland, Hungary, Romania. I grew up, I'm not joking, a stone's throw away from the Ukrainian border in Slovakia. The best equivalent that I can say is El Paso and Juarez. So I live in El Paso, and Ukraine is literally Juarez. I can walk 3 minutes from my house, I'm already in Ukraine. So I'm right there. Unfortunately, we see a lot of refugees right now coming through the borders. It's a very affected area. So I grew up right there on the border. We share a similar language. I actually share a dialect of Ukrainian. That's the Slovak I speak. So it's very intertwined culturally, just as you can imagine. Anyone from Texas living on the border, even though it's that border region is very interconnected. So that's the part of the world I'm from.
How do you consider about Todd's plan for hemp in Ukraine? What do you think about it?
Honestly, I never realized. So I always knew about hemp being used in like parchment and sails, but with the advent of hempcrete, and especially I think Todd will hit upon it later, how carbon negative it is. It doesn't produce carbon; it actually takes away carbon from the environment, and as well as it being lightweight, being as strong, if not stronger than concrete. In addition to being non-flammable, I think it's a great investment and also a great product that Ukrainians can themselves grow. Because like what we see right now, I'm gonna speak about a little bit later, because in the Army, I was a logistics officer. And in Ukraine, there's a massive issue going on with logistics, getting stuff to and from Ukraine because of, for example, the rail gauges. Right now, there's a lot of mines in the Black Sea, and Ukrainians put a lot of mines because they were fearing a Russian invasion through the Black Sea. But at the same time, the Black Sea is their main port of exfil and infill. So imagine you have one door, and in front of that one door, your main door to your house, you put in a minefield. So that really affects the inning and outgoing infill and outfill of products. So I feel that hemp, if you can grow it in Ukraine, that'll provide a great opportunity for Ukrainians, not only to get the medicine, the food, but also the rebuilding, what Todd's kind of mentioning right now with hemp.
Yeah. When we talk about processing hemp, in order for the hemp to get to the customer, after it's grown, it's got to be processed. And there's different types of processing, right? Hemp comes in a lot of different raw materials based off what industry it goes into, right? If you're going to put it in textiles and you're going to make clothes out of it, then it needs to come from a younger plant, harvested and sent through, and has to be really soft. If you're going to make fiber for filters, it's going to be a little, you would use the fully grown plant where it's been harvested after it's produced seeds. You take that seeds and go to create feed and food, and then you take the stalk and you create filters and whatnot. These processing plants are going to be pivotal to the Ukraine government. How many do they have currently, or do they have very many to start with?
I don't know the number. I think they have 2 at this point, right? There's a small amount of hemp being grown in Ukraine. 2019, they grew 1,500 acres. They are already building hempcrete homes. We have a good friend, Sergey Kovalenkov, who will be on our show at some point, the CEO of Hempire. He's building a hemp house in Kyiv right now, not just a hemp house, a hemp building for refugees and for wounded veterans. But they're no stranger to hemp, right? Neither Ukraine nor Russia, right? In 1812, Napoleon fought wars in Ukraine to prevent the export of Ukrainian and Russian hemp into back to Britain, right? Because it was with this hemp fiber that Britain was able to dominate the seas, and France and the UK weren't quite friendly at that time, but what I'm saying is they're no stranger to hemp. It's one of the most fertile soils on the planet. As I said, they're building hemp houses. They're even making hemp meatballs in Ukraine. And I just saw recently that they're starting to grow certain fibers they said for military purposes, and I think it's probably for clothing or material or something, or perhaps hempcrete, right? Because we know that the hempcrete structures also are, very strong. And when you end up with this structure that is strong, it's mold, mildew, pest, and fire resistant, right? You can see these videos on YouTube of people holding a torch to a hempcrete block for 45 minutes, and you wipe the ash away, and it's, almost unscathed entirely. So it's kind of a future environment focused building material. We talk a lot about it, using it to regenerate the soil in Ukraine, right? To heal that soil and to sink carbon, because it sinks carbon more than any other plant that we grow, except for certain trees, but it sinks carbon. And then we can use that byproduct of the hemp plant itself to then make hempcrete, which is again carbon negative. As hempcrete solidifies, it sucks in around, I think it's 78 kilograms of CO2 per cubic meter, whereas in contrast with concrete, a cubic meter of concrete requires the expression of at least 250 kilograms of CO2.
So when we look at this plan, we know that processors are going to need to be put out there. We know that when we grow, a lot of soil testing, so we'll have to have many universities from across the world come together to help with it as well. One of the problems that I think they're definitely going to run into is personnel needing to man these facilities, right? So a facility to grow 1 million, if you wanted to process 1 million pounds in the United States, it's going to cost you roughly $50 million to put together. And it's going to take anywhere from 10 to 15 people to run it. Right. What was the population of Ukraine prior to the war with Russia?
I don't know exactly, but a lot.
I was kind of curious,
a
right?
lot. I'm going to say 20-something million.
What was it?
40 million plus or minus.
Now talk to me about the displacement of refugees.
Well, I'm glad. So that's the idea. The people are the ones that we should focus on with this, right? Because if you're going to have an industry, people have to be trained. And when I say trained, I'm not talking about training people to plant a seed and harvest it and everybody becomes a hemp farmer. What I'm really talking about is using this plant to its maximum capacity, right? We have I think there are somewhere around 10 to 12 million Ukrainians who are displaced outside of their borders. And they are in places, the most close in proximity, Poland, which grows, I think, the second largest amount of hemp in all of Europe, France, Germany, through the Benelux region, UK, Canada, United States, all of these places, right, where they are NATO allies, first and foremost, right? So there's that military connection, but they are also really high-end producers of hemp materials, to include hempcrete products and batteries. There's so many things that we can make out of. For example, the Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Audi, they're all making their door panels out of hemp these days, because you can manufacture anything you can make out of plastic, you can make out of hemp. Anything you could make out of cotton, you can make out of hemp. So it requires a reimagination of the agricultural infrastructure and the outputs of that infrastructure, which freaks a lot of people out, right? Because you can grow potatoes, but you can only make like a couple of products out of it, right?
Right.
Out of hemp, if you can imagine again, food for humans, feed for animals, fuel, fiber, building material, and
that
medicine.
was one of the things I was going to say. There's 25,000 different items you can make with hemp. And if we take a look at Ukraine, we say, what are their major markets they've been so good at for the past, generation? More likely, the items that you're growing from hemp that you can make from hemp fit into some of those industries, right? And so that's where you start to strengthen it up. And when you're able to identify the industries that you want to participate in, you're able to identify how that process has to go. Right. So now we know, well, we need to process this hemp for the oil and gas industry to make CLR, or for filter industry, or for construction industry for soil erosion for the side of roads and things of that nature. These are items that they're going to need in Ukraine, not only to rebuild the roads and the infrastructure for them, but also to sell outside of that. That's what I think the versatility of this plant becomes so popular. And that's one of the things, Mike, when you know that area, you know those people. I mean, do you think that this is something that that they can generationally continue to use, right?
Absolutely. And the thing that I really want to kind of highlight is I spoke to one of a colleague today, and I'm like, hey, in the U.S., he is in the electrical contractor, and I was like, have you ever heard of hempcrete? He's like, what is that? Like you can make concrete out of hemp. And you mentioned there's thousands of use cases for hemp, but because of the stigma, the taboo that hemp was for the past 70 years, the first thing that you think of hemp was cannabis, getting high, being lazy. You don't realize all of the positives that you can get out of this plant: medicinal, food, construction. The first thing that we have to do is really educate the populace, both inside the U.S. and in Ukraine, about all the positives that you can get from this plant. Because like I said, it's an easy fallback to just say, oh, you're just going to get high and be lazy, right? And that's completely ignoring all the positive benefits of this plant. In terms of Ukraine, Ukraine is always known, it's called, Tal was kind of mentioning before, the soil of Ukraine is called, in Ukraine and Slovak, it's called Chernozem, which means black earth. And black earth is this equivalent of fertilizer. And imagine parts of Ukraine have natural fertilizer for meters below the ground. And that's why it's an old joke. It's like you don't even have to plant it in the ground. You just do a crop duster, you just dust the area with seeds and they'll just grow. So if you can say that, but with hemp, the Ukrainians are the breadbasket of Europe. They can feed, the Ukraine by itself can feed more or less the entire European continent by itself. And just with hemp, you can reconstruct Ukraine in addition to export to other countries to make the things that you mentioned out of plastic, with BMW, with Audi, with anything, the door handles. So not only can they reconstruct, but they also create an export market so they can bring back some capital and further reinvest in the country.
Yeah.
There's a lot of companies out there that are interested in starting to use hemp, and I know you mentioned BMW and a few of those others, but along with that is Patagonia. I know that they mentioned wanting to use more hemp. I've heard Levi said the same thing. Oh, there you go. We're in Patagonia area.
Yeah,
I heard the shirt when you put it on.
Yeah.
With those companies are wanting to invest in it.
Yeah.
But obviously, they're not going to invest in it unless there is some either kind of plan and there's a promise from a federal government saying that they would like to be able to do this. 'Cause it's going to take billions of dollars.
Yeah, and I think that crisis moment of what's happening in I should say the region, right? Because if we consider the number of displaced people out of Ukraine, and then you combine that with, I think it's 2.5 million Turks who just lost their homes in massive earthquakes in NATO ally Turkey, right? This is a growth industry. This is a growth opportunity. We should be promoting the cultivation of hemp for that carbon sinking capacity, and we should be building things with it so that as it cures and as it solidifies, it creates healthy homes that are mold, mildew, pest, and fire resistant. It creates places that are sucking in carbon consistently, and places that require less energy to heat or cool because of the lightweight, strong material that hempcrete becomes. It has this really high R factor, meaning that you have to cool it less in the summer and heat it less in the winter. So it's requiring less energy, and that's a piece of the conversation is in those regions is energy. Where are you getting your energy from, and is it being used as a as a weapon against you, where you're pulling that from? So anyway, I think as Ukraine rebuilds, as other countries rebuild, as we go through this continued evolution of this planet, we have to be putting in the best technology, the most technology, the most future focused buildings as possible through the process, and at the same time you're creating an industry. And just final word on how to really link that, how to really synchronize that is, I think, through academia. Okay, one of the things, like that's the place where they're really supposed to be thinking big thoughts. Like here, Texas A&M has a huge hemp program, and they're doing hempcrete building. My son is a freshman at Kansas State University, and they just built a hempcrete house there. Our children know how to use it because I think they see this as a potential issue or a potential solution to issues that our generation and others have given them, for their inheritance.
I think our generation, the next generation, is really going to take hemp and explode with it. I'd like to be able to see, because we know that in Central Europe, especially in Eastern Europe, far more hemp is being grown in that area than in the United States, or especially in Western Europe. So I think as far as supply goes, in order to help rebuild, I think we have plenty of acreage. I think we have plenty of people who know how to grow it. And I think our biggest issue is the planning and the capital to execute it.
Yeah.
I think people would be far more concerned and far more energetic, from at least the people in the United States, about sending money over there to help rebuild their agricultural program versus sending them tanks.
Right.
Yeah. Because eventually we're going to have we want this war over with.
Right.
So that we'd much rather send a tractor, a John Deere, than an Abrams to help them out.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd rather send like a real plow rather than a mine plow.
Oh, exactly. Those are the ones that we truly want to see. And I see that veterans seem to be pushing this aspect. I think because the way we were raised in the military, right? We're raised to solve problems with the tools that you have. And we know that we have access to this tool. The only problem is the bureaucratic issue with it.
Yeah.
Right. And that tends to be very annoying to people like us, because it keeps us from getting a job done that shouldn't keep us from getting a job done.
Well, I honestly, for me, I keep going back to, Mike and I's alma mater, right? I mean, we came out of a Sally Port every single day, and it said duty, honor, country, right? And for me, it's duty. It is our responsibility. Knowing what we know now as veterans, I know that this can contribute to so much, because when you're on active duty, man, these people aren't looking at this, right? No. It's like very blinders on, because, it's illegal, so it's bad, and, all of that business.
Correct.
And so now this is the opportunity where we can open up the aperture and really look at this, how the re-legalization of hemp and cannabis, how this can address a lot of issues that have been created by cannabis prohibition, and by pollution, and by a lack of focus on healthy building. This is an opportunity. We have to look at it as an opportunity, because it's not stopping. I mean, this is we're in a massive global calamity where global powers are shifting today. So this is a way that we could address it. It's not the solution. I don't know what the entire solution is, but I know that cannabis is part of the future solution.
I agree with that. One of the reasons we created this 5. Go ahead, Mike.
One thing I really like to highlight that Todd kind of mentioned previously, right? This is a piece to the puzzle, right? It's not a complete solution. However, if you have a piece of the puzzle, why not put it in, right? It'd be stupid not to. One thing that Todd mentioned is how hempcrete really, because of the insulation, because of the R factor, reduces the amount of energy used. speaking from my personal, because I have a grandfather that still lives in my village on the border. One of the biggest problems in Europe and Ukraine as well is the cost of energy. In the US, overall, energy is actually pretty cheap. My grandfather told me he has approximately, let's say, keep it simple, right? $500 a month for retirement. He uses almost 35 to 40%, especially in their cold winter. I don't know if you remember a few months ago. The big question is Putin throwing all these bombs and these missiles and trying to really cripple the energy infrastructure because he was expecting a cold winter and the energy costs are so high. So imagine spending 40% of your retirement just on energy. And if hempcrete can reduce that spend 10%, 5%, that leaves so much more room for everyone to reinvest and use that money, that extra 5% of your income for anything else. And that's a really key to the puzzle, because anytime you have more spare income, you can reinvest that back into the economy. You can reinvest that back into whatever you would like to do. And that flexibility opens a lot of different doors. So yes, while hemp overall is just one piece of the puzzle, why not put that piece in and just try and make a life 5% better for anyone else? I think that's kind of a fact a little bit overlooked, because in the US, we're so blessed with, having these two oceans that protect us and having a lot of cheap energy, but a lot of the world have that cheap energy. So I think, that's a massive solution, sometimes a little bit understated.
That's true. I mean, you didn't think about that. You shouldn't be spending 20 to 30% of your income keeping your house heated.
Yeah.
He told me, literally told me during the winter, he has to have half his house shut off because he doesn't have enough money to heat his entire house. Imagine spending 40% of your income just to keep your house warm.
That's insane. Well, our time's up. I really appreciate you guys coming out and talking about this. Hemp for Victory was made to have conversations about not only just hemp and how it can help us with textiles and everything else. That is one small part of it. The other big part of it is that we talk about how it's changing veterans' lives, right? Every day, veterans are moving over to cannabis. There's 60% more chance likely for them to use it than they were before. And Hemp for Victory, with its leadership, senior leadership coming from the military that's speaking out saying, hey, these vets need this plant. We need to legalize this plant so we can be more useful to us and stop worrying about it. It's a detriment to our military. It is a detriment to our veterans. And this is not the way we treat people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and also for veterans, there are employment opportunities within this industry, from the cultivation, manufacturing, dispensing, testing, transportation. I mean, there's so many jobs and ancillary jobs.
That's right.
I think there was 108,000 new jobs created in the United States last year because of hemp and cannabis. And in Missouri, where I live, 1 in 10 new jobs last year were created by the cannabis industry.
Right, and Mike's got a new license right now.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the name of the place?
Green Knight Cannabis. We're based out of New Jersey. Knock on wood, God has blessed us. We were awarded a license last week of Thursday, and really just focusing on making a positive impact in the community. What was mentioned is, listen, the jobs created doesn't have to be physically touching the plant. There's so many ancillary jobs you have not even thought of, but just because of the industry that's available, they're created.
Right. That's what we got for you guys. So go to our website, hempforvictory.info. Donate to our cause. It's the money that we raise allows us to be able to get out and talk to other military leadership, people at Fort Hood or Fort Leavenworth, the VA. They're going to talk to us. DC.
I'm going to DC here.
That's
shortly.
right. So help us out. Glad you guys came. Talk to you soon.